Kia ora and welcome to Mana Talanoa. It's our Wahine Toa Women in Sports series, and it's a pleasure for me to be speaking to a Wahine Toa who's played in 5 World Softball Championships, played professionally in the USA, and also was awarded the New Zealand Softball Player of the Year. So welcome and kia ora to Lara Andrews. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Hey, look, you've got a really extensive international playing background, but you're from the Hutt Valley and from Wainuiomata, so it'd be good to talk about your whakapapa, your heritage, and let's start there. Where are you from?
Yeah, kia ora. I was lucky enough to be raised by my grandparents in Petone, and my grandparents are of Māori and Lara Tongan descent. So my whānau stems from Taranaki, Ngāti Ronoi, Te Iwi, and then my koro came from the islands. So I was very fortunate to have a mixture of Rarotongan and Māori philosophy in my growing up. But also my mother is Pākehā, and having that exposure as well, you know, it's just awesome to be able to have the different perspectives and different visions and different ways of doing things, so that as a young person I was able to jump side by side along the way. And yeah, I found that at a young age I learned that it was an asset to have that mixture of culture from where I'm from. But to be honest, I'm so proud to be from the Hutt and from Petone, and sometimes when I reflect on my career, my journey, I often think, wow, you know, I just feel like I'm a normal kid from hoary little Māori girl from Petone, you know. So to travel the world and to compete nationally is just unreal. It's awesome.
Yeah, oh, look, and that's a magnificent background you've got with Rarotongan, Māori and New Zealand Pākehā. You know, I do recall, and I met you a couple of years ago, and you were at the Te Ara Whānui Kura Kaupapa Māori, the Te Awa Kairangi school, and you were involved with some coaching and mentoring and teacher support there. Tell us a bit about that, because that involved elements of Te Reo Māori and tikanga and kaupapa.
Yeah, I remember that day, and I really enjoyed working with the kura on Capital Stars, and that was a program where they were putting athletes in front of young children in schools to talk about holistic well-being, to also talk about the realities of being a professional athlete, and also being a role model in the Māori community. And I mean, those tamariki were so inspired, they were so happy, they were just vibing so much from the interaction and the connection that we made. And I just feel that softball has given me this vehicle and this opportunity to share stories and to inspire and develop young people. So being a part of that program sits really close to my heart, just because I know that I was a kid like that when I was a kid. So, you know, all it takes is one moment that may shift someone's path or may motivate some young child to do something or to dream big.
Fantastic. And, you know, sport provides important role models and a vehicle for change and champion for young people. So really awesome to see you do that, and doing that in a kura kaupapa Te Reo Māori setting. So, you know, you talked about you're in there, you know, what took you there is your background in softball and as a New Zealand representative. But let's talk about your journey in the sport, and where did it start for you? Did you start off playing softball? Was that the sport that was around the home?
No, actually it wasn't. I mean, as a young person watching TV, we only really saw the Silver Ferns and maybe the hockey team, you know, when they competed at the Olympics, but hardly ever did we see female athletes on TV. So as a young person, I thought the only future in sport as a woman was netball. So I wanted to be a Silver Fern, and as I grew older and started to play netball, I wasn't really that good. So my goals then shifted to I wanted to wear the fern on my chest. And as a 9-year-old, I went to watch my sister play softball, and they needed another player. So I jumped on under 15s, jumped in the outfield, picked up a bat and a glove for the first time. I played that game, and I've played ever since. As I guess I was in the right place at the right time.
Well, and was there a particular club around that you were aligned with or playing for? Was it through the school?
No, actually, it was through Hutt City United. My sister and my brothers played there before me, and because they played, I guess I just wanted to play. And then I was with Hutt City United for about 4 or 5 years, and then I had the opportunity to move over to Te Aroha softball down here at Waifatu, who had the New Zealand coach alongside a lot of New Zealand players at that time and some fantastic role models. So that shift and transfer really was a massive benefit to me in my game, and really enhanced my knowledge of the game and also my skill and ability.
Yeah, look, they're both big clubs in the softball scene, as you know. Like Hutt City, I think way back, and they had, and certainly in the men's softball, people like John Dawson, who was the New Zealand pitcher as well, and they've been a very, very strong. The Hutt's been a strong softball catchment area, and then of course going to Te Aroha, and there's some really legends in the sport that go way back there, like Elaine Cowan, for example, who are people that have been around the sport for a while. So I can imagine what it would be like for you being around some of those people. So who were some of the key people at that club that you think had a strong influence on you and helped mentor and direct you in your softball career?
Yeah, honestly, I can't actually pinpoint one or two people. It really was a handful of people that really supported and influenced me in my journey. And if I move back a couple of steps, when I played for Hutt City United, I used to go to tournaments and Te Aroha would be there. And Te Aroha had this whole whānau supporters, a whole lot of them, about 20 to 30 of them, having a kai and having a laugh. And I remember I used to walk past them in my blue uniform, and they used to say, "When are you going to come back to your whānau, bub? When are you going to come play for us again?" Because I went to Kohanga down there at Waifatu Kohanga. So a lot of the girls we went to kindy together. So when I did transfer over, straight away I was a part of a massive culture and a massive community, and that vibe really helped me through my adolescent development age when I was growing up in college, and having that support system there was really, really important. But some of the really amazing athletes that just taught me so much about life and also about softball was Melissa Upu, now Tupu Iwao, Zavana Aranga, who's a legend from the club, Cindy Portai, Povi, Nards, Nadia Morio Hoho, who's also a police officer, which I found that's just so admirable from a young person's point of view. I can't even, a whole lot of them, and also Mike Walsh too, who's just a fantastic coach.
Well, all those Wahine Toa names that you rattled off here, they're very strong in the sport locally and also at an international level. Those names, Melissa Upu, Zavana Aranga, and even like Kiri Shaw way back there. I was thinking a bit further back, I'm just recalling some of the big names from way back. Gina Weber was a big international star on the scene as well, and Saabole as well, who are coming through the scene. So really cool to reflect on some of those people that are along the pathway when we progress through sport. So your progression took you into, you made the New Zealand side at a very early age, and then also had a scholarship in the US. So let's talk about your moving on to the scholarship in the USA, where you went over and played softball. Where was your first placing, if you like, when you went overseas in the US?
Yeah, so being fortunate enough to play with the Te Aroha team really challenged me in my skill level, and I really enjoyed that sense of learning and that sense of growth. And from there, being challenged in that environment really pushed me to want to be the best. And if you want to be the best, you have to play with the best. And that's the whole reason why I started to pursue that university scholarship opportunity. And so my first opportunity came through with a 2-year scholarship at Itawamba Community College in Tupelo, Mississippi. It's where Elvis is born. And that's a community college, which is a 2-year institution. So a little bit of a smaller step than going to a big Division I university. From there, I really did have to go through a lot of change, a lot of uncomfort. Obviously, you know, we didn't speak the same language. I spoke English, they spoke English, but we never understood each other. I had no whānau, I didn't know the coach, I didn't know the teammates, and I'd never gone to university before. So I was in this very uncomfortable zone, and I had to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so softball was the one thing that I could speak, that they could speak, and we could relate. And so softball really was the tool to help me survive that transformation in that uncomfort zone. And then from there, I actually had a really outstanding season. I put up some really awesome numbers in the batters statistics, and also I got all A's. From there, I was heavily recruited by a lot of universities, and I got the opportunity to sign a contract to play at the University of Delaware, which is a Division I institution. And that there was another big step of uncomfortableness, and just that kind of next level of being in an American environment and being in this massive university where you really are just a statistic. And that big jump there really pushed me again to grow and to develop as a better athlete, because I was continuing to be challenged, and I liked that, and that's really what drove me through the whole process.
Well, one of the things I'm finding as I'm speaking to people in the Mana Talanoa series is athletes that travel overseas and really particularly missing whānau, and for some it's like, I need to get home, and like, as you were saying, you had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So what were the kinds of things, like softball was one thing, did you just continuously train, or did you have buddies that you would mentor in with? What were sort of some of the things that you, strategies and tactics that you had to use to get through and be resilient?
Yeah, so this is a time where we didn't have smartphones. So, you know, we had flip phones, and the only way to call whānau was to get those cards where you dial in the 12-digit number, and then you've got to wait for the beep, and it costs, you know, $2 a minute. So my ability to communicate back home was very limited. And I do believe that was a benefit for me, because I had to just get on with it. And I had to get on with my life and just live it, because it was too hard. So the world that I lived in was a different world at that time. And to be honest, I utilized the opportunity to have beautiful facilities, beautiful resources, all the resources I needed to become the best player I could be. I put on like 10 kgs, 15 kgs my first 3 months there, because I was just eating everything that I could, because it was all unlimited food, and everything was fried from the south. So that comfort food may have kept me there a little bit. But I also got a job too, which helped me keep me busy and distracted, but also gave me the means to go and do stuff. Go to the markets, go down to the city town hall when they had a concert on. I was able to immerse myself into the environment and make some friends, and that really did help me get through. But you know, it was really tough. Probably the toughest time in my whole life really was getting through that first few months of that transition. But once I got through it, I started to fly.
Yeah, well, I think you point out some really important things there, and that is about adapting to your environment. And, you know, if you're up for the challenge, you need to be able to adapt. And if you don't, then you don't survive. And so I think congratulations on the basically figuring it out and toughing it out, and then having the resilience to do that. But then that was the, you also talked about you got good A-level results in the education there. And you did a Masters of Science in Human Development. So tell us about that. So, you know, what does that mean? You know, and I understand now, you know, you're working on your thesis and PhD doctorate. So you're obviously a very committed person to when you put yourself to the task. But yeah, the study that you're doing over there, what is, tell us what that's about.
Yeah, so when I first got there, I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I was literally just going to play softball, and then I was going to class at the same time because I had to. And as I started to study a little bit more, I started to find what I was interested in. And then I paired that with what was I getting good grades in, just to make sure I had the standard that I needed. Because over there, if you don't do well in your academics, you don't play. So there's a direct consequence there, whereas in New Zealand, our system sits separately. School sits over here and sports sits over here, and often don't communicate. So when I started to find my interests, what I really enjoyed was learning about human development. So how does a person develop over time as a 5-year-old, 10-year-old, etc., etc. But what I really found interesting was how a family functions at each phase of the lifespan. So a family with 2 young children, or a family with 2 teenagers, a family with young adults, and then etc., etc. So I started to really focus on that holistic development of the person. And then the holistic development of the relationships of families. And I started to really get it, and I started to really be intrigued and question. And then that's when I started to find that passion for learning in the academic side of things. I had a passion for sport and physical movement and being able to be competitive, but I didn't really find that love of academics. And it wasn't until I got to that point that I thought, this is it, this is what I want to do. So my research was based on parental involvement in sport and children's positive youth development. So what are the impacts that parents play on their children when they're playing sport? And that's kind of where my master's thesis started to go. And then I got my master's thesis published, and some really amazing outcomes came out of it. And then that's what led me to continue my research to do my doctorate degree. I didn't answer the question I wanted to answer, so I had to keep researching it. And then, that's how it all happened.
And so you're continuing to do that study here in New Zealand, but it's still from out of the university back in the States?
Yes, so I'm doing I want to do a comparison research on parental involvement in sports in America and parental involvement in sports in New Zealand. And I want to look at different cultural parental involvement expectations across culture. And I want to do a comparison around what things lead to positive outcomes and what characteristics leads to negative outcomes, as dropout, burnout, injuries, or loss of love of the game. So,
Well, that sounds really fascinating. I'd love to look at your research and writings there, because, when you talk about cultures, there's, New Zealand and the US, and we're Western culture, so in a way we're similar. But then if you look at, like you say, the whānau culture that existed at Te Aroha when you arrived there, that's elements of tikanga Māori and kaupapa Māori. And look, I just think that's fascinating. There's elements of our own ethnic, cultural groups that add to that as well, on top of what might be Western culture and expectations around media, expectations around performance, so it'd be fascinating to see that. I think there's a lot of good reading in there that would all benefit from. And I'm particularly interested around what our Polynesian culture adds to that dynamic as well. So that'll be fascinating. In terms of the sport then, what was different about playing in the US? And, was it faster? Was it more competitive? Or, what was the same and maybe what was different compared to New Zealand?
I guess from straight away, I learned that it was a business over there. Sport is a business, and sport, it comes with money. That's something that I didn't really understand here. From growing up, I just played sport because I loved it and I wanted to. But over there, it really is a business. And I had to learn that really quickly. I had to learn the ability to network, the ability to speak at the right level and to ask for stuff that I needed. So that straight away added a different element to the game that I was used to. Secondly, I felt that I had an advantage in a sense, not in the sense of resources or facilities, because we don't have the greatest resources in the world. USA have the best facilities and resources in the world. But what I had that they didn't have was I had knowledge. I had played with women who had been at the Olympics. I had played with New Zealand players who had travelled the world, and that knowledge that they gave to me and gifted me was knowledge that these young players in the States didn't have, but they had the coaches. So they had the coaches with the advanced knowledge, with the advanced new ways of doing things. So what I did was I was able to pair up what I had learned from here and what I could take, and I learned so much over there around new techniques, new philosophies, new ways of doing things, and I meshed it together. And then that's kind of where I really started to develop my own style of play, and my own perspective of how to play the game. The other part was we traveled a lot. Softball gave me the ability to see the world and to travel the country and to try different types of foods and to meet different types of people. And softball really was a catalyst to just everything. And that's why I feel so obligated to giving back to the game as well.
So, and there, what were some of the new things that you thought you picked up over there that would be, fairly new or totally new to New Zealand that, as you're saying, you can bring back to our game here? Are there a couple of things that you could talk about that are going, well, that's something I've picked up over there that's going to help us here?
Yeah, if I probably don't want to go into specific skill, but one thing that I did learn that I think we can utilise better in New Zealand is that the more educated I became, the better softball player I became. And that's something that nobody ever taught me as a young person, that there's a direct correlation between your performance and the ability to learn in the classroom and to develop and grow yourself, and how that directly impacts you as a player and how you can utilize both of those environments to be the best person and player you can be. And that's something no one spoke to me about. So I think it's there, but nobody really talks about it as much. Secondly, we have so much room to improve here, and specifically in softball. Any drill or any skill that we can get from the States can really enhance our sport in general. But mainly around hitting, we don't play enough games here, and that's one thing that we need to do more of. I mean, I played 52 games in 3 months, and here we play one game on a Saturday. And we train once a week for 45 minutes. If we want to be the best, we need to compete with the best. And if we want to compete, we have to be training multiple hours every single day. And that's the challenge, is we don't have the right system to be able to do that.
Those are fantastic insights, Lara, around learnings to come back here, and particularly the hard work. And speaking of hard work and being the best, and performing on the big stage, the Olympics is the big stage for softball. And I understand from our talk earlier how softball for women has been kind of piloted out. And 2008 was the first time where you potentially had an opportunity there, but there was an eligibility criteria that maybe didn't help you. It'd be awesome to talk about that. Firstly, the Olympics, softball, how it's placed in the Olympics. And then your journey back there around the 2008 Olympics.
Yeah, so in 2000, the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, a softball team was named, and the New Zealand team went to the Olympics that year. I think I was 10 years old. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, 2000. Yeah, I was 10. And I remember I had just started playing softball, and I remember a few of the players from the hut were going to the Olympics because they were in the hut news. And I thought, man, that's so cool. That is so cool. I want to do that. That's any athlete's dream, really. And so the next opportunity to go to the Olympics was the 2008 Beijing Olympics. at this time I was about 16, 17 years old, and I'd been going through a few things as a young person, and I actually pulled out of softball and had a break. I took a year off to focus on my studies, and that then led to me not being qualified to make the women's franchise team. And at that point in time, you had to play franchise women's league in order to be named in the New Zealand White Sox. Right. And that for me was a really gutting experience, because I thought to myself, I should have been there. I should have been there, and I could have been there. And so missing out at that point, at that time, was the end of my career in my mind, you know. But really it helped me solidify and understand that actually, no, I wanted to be there, and I want to work hard to get to the next opportunity to get to the Olympics. And that really did change and shift my motivation and push and drive, really. So sometimes you have to lose something in order to gain something. Yeah.
And of course, the next Olympics were scheduled for 2020 for this year, but obviously COVID's means that's not going to happen. What's the next steps then for softball at the Olympics from here?
Yeah, so we went to the qualifiers in September last year in China, and we lost in a tiebreaker against Philippines, which is so close. So we didn't qualify for the Olympics this time round. So what that means is the next opportunity will be 2028 at the Olympics in LA, I believe. They'll be having softball there, and so the qualifier for that Olympics will be 2026. So we've got a bit of time for someone like myself who've been playing at the national level, international level for 16 years. I'm having a break, taking some time off, and hopefully in a year or so I will be deciding whether I want to be a part of that campaign, or if I'll be maybe coaching or doing some other things. So I really do want to be there if I can be there, and if I'm able to contribute to the team, I will be there.
Fantastic. And a lot can happen in terms of keeping the fire going up until that stage. Well, you're saying taking the break, but in a way you haven't, because I read in the local paper you're playing rugby for Petone. Tell us about that. What's the involvement for you with Petone Rugby and the Petone Rugby women's side? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so our son plays rugby, and we were down at training, and it was a rainy day, so everybody's kind of huddled around the green room, and as our son was finishing training, the girls were going in to do their training and bumped into them, and they were saying how they needed numbers and did I want to play, and I said, oh no, it's okay, I'm taking a break. Anyway, forgot about it, and then I got a call about 2 weeks later saying we don't have enough players. Can you just come and play, please? And I thought, I'll come to training and I'll feel it out. And so I went to training, and then so played the last 2 games of the season and absolutely loved it. I remember being a young person watching my dad play for Petone and my uncle play for Petone and my family, and hanging out down there as a young child. And there's just so much connection there, and actually I do love the game of rugby, and it's in my blood. So getting out there and actually giving it a crack and having a go, it's just fulfilled me, especially with COVID and not being able to play any sport. I was just excited to get out there, but man, I got some bruises, and I'm not used to the recovery of rugby, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's fabulous, and fantastic to mention your dad, John Andrews, who was a hooker for Petone at Premier level and played representative football and was part of a really golden era of Petone rugby when they were winning championships. So that sporting gene goes through to you and to the family. So awesome to see you playing rugby. Look, in terms of women in sport, you've been a leader, you've been a captain in sport for women. If you were to talk about things that you've learned about leadership that you'd pass on to young Wahine Toa coming through, aspiring to do well in sport, what would be some of those leadership lessons for Wahine Toa that you would talk to them about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking about the leaders that led me, and then kind of what I've done along my journey as a captain. And it's really important to be able to communicate effectively with your team at all levels. So one, get public speaking, get training in that space so that you are able to deliver the message clear and concise to coaches, to officials, and to your teammates. That was a really key thing for me, and it helped me to be more confident as a leader. The second thing is, when I played professional softball in America, I played on the bench, and it was the first time in my whole life that I'd been on the bench, and it was inspiring to me because I thought to myself, wow, this is an area of my leadership that I have not utilized. I didn't understand wholly what it was like to be the 17th man on the bench. And so I had to really learn, one, how to deal with those emotions, but two, as a leader, I thought, wow, I've got to be better at incorporating and involving and ensuring that every single person on this team feels confident and feels engaged in this process. Because that was so key. So that was a really a hard way to learn, but a really good learning for me. And then thirdly, I think expectations is something that not many people talk about in the sense of leadership. And I don't feel that I was well equipped with understanding the expectations of being a leader of a national team. And it wasn't until I made a couple of mistakes or I did something and kind of reflected on it where I started to learn those things. So expectation is really something that would be good to just to communicate with other leaders around what their expectations have been and the highlights, with the media and everything going on, how to deal with those situations. If you could get a little bit of help in that space, that will give you a head start for sure.
Well, those are three fantastic gems for people to take on board. I think communication, understanding that, time on the bench is learning, and then also, being able to have all that resilience that you're talking about in the game is wonderful. So for women in sport, there are a number of challenges that women in sport do face. But there's some wonderful things going on. What are some of the things that we need to see more of for women in sport? Like, we know there are challenges around media, around equity and money spent on the sport. But what are some of the things that you think we need to see more of to help promote and champion women in sport?
You've touched on a couple of things that have gotten better, media and coverage. Coverage was probably one of the biggest barriers for women in sport over the past decade, but now we're really starting to see much more female sport on TV, which is fantastic. More leadership opportunities for women in sport on the boards and on those high-level conversations, so that everybody is getting that multiple perspective of things. That's going to be really helpful to any organisation or any institution. In my opinion, I think it's seeing is believing. If young girls see women doing different things, they feel that they can do that too. And so really getting our Māori women, Pasifika women, athletes out in front of these tamariki so they can see it, it makes it real. It really does.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think there's a lot relative there to what you're talking about in your research study with, for example, with parents and their kids. And so when the kids see their parents role modeling good stuff, and it's exactly the same here, I feel, for women need to see women in leadership roles in the media, having a voice and being on those platforms. So I think that's awesome advice that we can follow. And in terms of now, Lara, what are you up to now? I understand you're up at Victoria University, and what's your role there, or what's your part that you're doing there? Is that studying, or are you doing a tutorial lecture role there as well?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm just working up there as the club manager. So managing the 190 student clubs that the university has. So that's ranging from sports clubs to political clubs to religious clubs to Māori Pasifika clubs. And what I do is I train the leaders of those clubs to ensure that they're running and they're confident to run their clubs as presidents, as treasurers and secretaries. So I really love my team. I work a part of the university recreation and sport team at the university. And I just feel that it's important that we talk about university specifically to our sports children, that you can go to university and you can play sport. That it's not just an institution for academic development. It's actually an institution that you can play as many sports as you want, and you can do what you love, but also get your degree, which is something that you can fall on later on in life, if something happens in your sporting career.
Well, and I think it goes hand in hand with one of the things you learned in the US about, being an educated athlete makes you a better athlete as well. Yeah, fantastic. Lara, look, it's been fantastic, been awesome, been really a great experience talking to you on this Mana Talanoa, Wahine Toa Women in Sport. Look, I love what you've been able to share with us, and thank you for your time for doing that around, the World Championships you've been to, your journey to the US to study, to make it over there, and to complete your masters, and now you're doing your doctorate, and then the gems about being a role model and leadership for Wahine Toa coming through. I think that's fantastic, and want to thank you for being able to share that and us be able to provide that that platform to other Wahine Toa that are coming through. So once again, kia ora and ngā mihi nui ki a koe for your time on Mana Talanoa.
Thank you so much for having me. And like I said from the start, I couldn't have done any of this without the support of my teammates and my coaches and my whānau. I've always had support from them throughout this whole journey, and I couldn't have done it without all of those people. So I just wanted to give a shout out to all of them, and also thanks for giving me the opportunity to share and talk about what sport has done for me, and how I've learned a lot through sport, and I just hope that whoever does listen to this kōrero can take something out of it to help themselves or help their whānau develop and grow as an athlete, but also as a person. Thank you.
Great. Kia ora.